Hello dear friends, this is your personal English coach Divyam here, and this video is for the explanation of the chapter The Luncheon, written by William Somerset Maugham. I'm making a video on this chapter because I got a request from one of the students, Miss Smriti Srivastav. She wanted me to explain the chapter The Luncheon as well as Little Eyes Upon You. I will definitely explain Little Eyes Upon You somewhere down the line, sometime later, so I request you to keep an eye on my channel. But until that time, bear with me. Let's understand this hilarious chapter called The Luncheon. Why do I call it hilarious? You'll find out at the end of the chapter. I saw her in the theatre. I sat down beside her during the interval. It was long since I had last seen her, and if someone had mentioned her name, I hardly think I would have recognized her. She addressed me brightly. So, it looks like the writer is trying to let us know something that happened in his own life. This is just a narration. This is not a story or a fiction or a non-fiction. This is something that happened in his own life. So he was sitting in a theater. He was waiting for someone because that someone might have asked him to meet her. And from the sentences, we can figure out that it's a lady. And they had decided to meet in a theater. And as soon as there was an interval, as we already know in movies, there are intervals. So during the interval, the lady comes out to meet the writer. It was a long time ago. They did not meet for quite some time. And the writer had already forgotten her. The writer had already forgotten about her until he saw her when she came out of a movie theater in the interval. The lady was very happy and she started talking happily. She was very happy to have seen the writer. Well, it is many years since we first met. How time does fly. Do you remember the first time I saw you? You asked me to luncheon. So, when they first met, who? The writer and the lady. The writer had asked the lady to have lunch together. That's when they first met. And she's surprised as to how time flies so fast. And this is the second time they were meeting. And now the writer is trying to recall everything that happened during their first meet. Did I remember? It was 20 years ago and I was living in Paris. I had a small apartment in Latin Quarter and I was earning only just enough money to keep body and soul together. So 20 years ago, the writer, maybe he was a beginner, maybe he was just about to start writing or to start his profession of writing novels or non-fiction or fiction, something. And he was living in a very small room during that time. And which was the place? It was Paris. There is also a mention of idiom here. Only just enough money to keep body and soul together, which means he was earning very less. Only the amount of money which would help him survive or pass on the days. He had no money for luxuries. So, what happened 20 years ago? The writer had written some sort of book. So let's move on. She had read a book of mine and had written to me about it. I answered, thanked her, and presently I received from her another letter saying that she was passing through Paris and would like to have chat with me. So, 20 years ago, the writer must have written something which was read by this lady, and the lady loved it. The lady liked it, and she was so happy that she decided to write a letter to the writer. Or maybe something like, hey, thank you for writing this wonderful book. I enjoyed it so much, and please keep writing, something like that. But the writer is also trying to tell us something that's going on at this moment when they are sitting in a movie theater. So, after 20 years, the lady had written another letter asking the writer to meet her one more time, to just have a word. Now, this paragraph or these set of lines are dedicated to what happened 20 years ago. So the writer, because he was a beginner and he was young, he had an impression that the lady who wrote a letter to her was very happy with his work, and she was young and beautiful, and the writer had an impression that he would be able to make a relationship with her. So he starts thinking, would I give her a little lunch at Foyot's? Foyot's is a restaurant at which the French senators ate, and it was so far beyond my means that I never ever thought of going there. But I was flattered and was too young to have learned to say no to a woman. I had 80 francs to last me the rest of the month, and a decent luncheon should not cost more than 15. If I stopped drinking coffee for the next 2 weeks, I could manage well enough. So, now there was somebody who was impressed with the writer's work, and she was so impressed that she had written a letter, and to respond to her, to write a letter back to her, what would he write? He would say, hey, I got your letter, and let's have a lunch somewhere together and talk about my novel. So the writer thinks, should I take her to one of the best restaurants just to make a good impression, just to make her feel that I have a lot of money? So he thinks of a restaurant in which only the French senators and all the rich people went. The name of the restaurant is Foyot's. The meaning is already written here. Here it says a member of Senate, but generally speaking, it means rich people. So the writer thinks, should I give her a lunch at a very expensive restaurant? The writer himself would never think of going there, because did he have money? No, he did not have enough money. So he would never have thought of going there alone. But now that the lady was coming to meet him, he thought of going there. What is flattered? Flattered means getting pleased by something or someone. If somebody praises you, you get flattered, you get happy. I was flattered and was too young to have learned to say no to a woman. So the writer was young and just a beginner, and he was so kind and generous that he could not say no to a woman. He could not say, no, I will not meet you. No, I will not come to see you. He would say yes to any woman. So there is also the word francs. What is francs? It is just a unit of France, Belgium, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and several other countries. Now this is a unit of currency. Just like we have rupees in India, francs was the unit of currency in France. Okay, so how much money did the writer have in the beginning of the month? Just 80 francs. And he's wondering that if I take that lady to Foyot's, then maximum I would have to spend 15 francs. Still I would have enough money to spend for the rest of the month. And then he starts thinking about saving more money in order to give her a good lunch at the Foyot's. He said, if I stop drinking a coffee maybe worth 5 francs or 10 francs, I will be able to help her give a good meal at Foyot's. So he starts thinking of saving more and more money. So he writes a letter back. He says, I answered that I would meet my friend at Foyot's on Thursday at 12:30. She was not so young as I expected. She was in fact a woman of 40, and she gave me the impression of having more teeth than were necessary for any practical purpose. She talked a lot, but since she seemed inclined to talk about me, I was prepared to be an attentive listener. So the writer writes a letter back to the lady. He says, hey, let's meet at Foyot's on Thursday at 12:30. And when she came to Foyot's, she was dominant. And how can we say she was dominant? Here there is another idiom that says having more teeth than were necessary. She used to talk a lot, and it looked to the writer that she is controlling things. So that's why he has mentioned this idiom. She gave an impression that she is more dominant, more controlling. And was she young? No, she was a woman of 40. She was 40 years old. So again, this is not something that the writer expected. She talked a lot, but why would the writer listen to her? The writer would listen to her because she would talk about the writer. Now in this world, if you talk about yourself, if anyone talks about themselves, right, they feel happy. Similarly, she would talk a lot, but if she's gonna talk about the writer would listen to her attentively. So therefore the writer decides that no problem, let her talk as much as she wants, but I would listen to her because she's gonna talk about my work, my article or chapter or novel, whatever I had written. I was startled when the menu was brought, for the prices were a good deal higher than I had expected. But she assured me, I never eat anything for luncheon, she said. The meaning of startled is to feel sudden shock or alarm. Yeah. To get shocked is to get startled. So what happens when you go to a rich restaurant and a very expensive and a good looking restaurant? When you see the menu card, you get shocked because the soup or a sandwich or a snack, a very small snack, would cost you like 200 rupees, 300 rupees. Same thing happened with the writer or the narrator. When the waiter brought the menu, he saw the list and the prices were too high. He had never been there in this restaurant. This is the first time. Now the lady, she said, hey, I usually don't have anything for the lunch, I skip lunch, she assures the writer. Now, the narrator or the writer is very generous. He says, don't say that, let's have something. Now that we have met already, let's have something. I never eat more than one thing. I think people eat far too much nowadays. A little fish perhaps. I wonder if they have any salmon. So, the lady assured the writer that she usually skips lunch. Okay, and then she says, I usually eat only one thing. Now what is that? She wanted to have a salmon. What is a salmon? The meaning is there on the right side. It is a large edible fish, right? People eat salmon a lot in United States. So this lady said, I'll just have only one thing, and that is a fish called salmon. And she also tells the writer that I don't know why people eat so much. They should eat very little, only one thing, just like I do. Well, it was early in the year for salmon and it was not on the menu, but I asked the waiter if there were any. Yes, a beautiful salmon had just come in. It was the first they had had. I ordered it for my guest. The waiter asked her if she would have something while it was being cooked. So, the situation became a little complicated. Initially, the lady said she usually skips lunch. Then she ordered one thing called salmon. Now, every fish, every fruit, every vegetable has their own seasons. And was it a season for hotels to keep salmon? No, it was not. And therefore, they did not even keep salmon on the menu card. But contrary to that situation, the waiter said, yes, we do have salmon. They just have arrived. They are fresh. You can eat. You can order one salmon if you want. So, because the writer is kind, he said, okay, bring one salmon, bring one fish. And the writer was asked by the waiter if he wants to have anything else. The waiter also asked the lady and the writer both if they would like to have anything else until the time the salmon is being cooked. So the lady says, no, I never eat more than one thing unless you have a little caviar. I never mind caviar. My heart sank a little. I knew I could not afford caviar, but I could not very well tell her that. I told the waiter to bring caviar. For myself, I chose the cheapest dish on the menu, and that was a mutton chop. Just imagine yourself earning very little. Okay, say you're earning 10,000 rupees and you have to spend the whole month down the line. Say it's just first of the month. You have 10,000 rupees and somebody who praises you comes to meet you and says, hey, let's have lunch together. You cannot say no. You take that lady or that gentleman to a restaurant, right? And could you say no to someone if they want to eat something? Could you say no to someone who is praising you? You cannot, right? So the same thing happened with the writer. Now, while the salmon is being cooked, Initially, she says, no, I don't want anything else. But then she says, unless you have a little caviar. Now, what is a caviar? Caviar is another fish, okay, which is eaten as a delicacy. So she says, I want another fish while one fish is being cooked. The writer is getting tensed because he doesn't have enough money to afford all of this. So he says, my heart sank a little. He knew that he could not afford caviar, but could he tell the lady that he doesn't have money? He cannot, because he wants to set a good impression on her. And what did the writer order for himself? Was it the case that the writer did not want to have all such beautiful things? No, it was not the case. He wanted to have good dishes, but he didn't have money. So what he did is he ordered something very cheap and affordable for himself, so that he do not have to pay a huge amount. Okay, and so he ordered mutton chop, which is chopped flesh of a fully grown sheep, which was very cheap during his time. I think you are unwise to eat meat, she said. I don't know how you can expect to work after eating heavy things like chops. I don't believe in overloading my stomach. So here we see that the lady is constantly assuring the writer or the narrator that she doesn't eat much. Okay, and here she's also telling the writer that why do people overload their stomachs when they just want to eat a little? And when the writer ordered something very economical and cheap and affordable, she says, why are you eating such a heavy dish? And I'm not sure why or how you can work after eating such a heavy dish, because I feel drowsy. I just feel like sleeping. So in my opinion, you should not have something heavy. She's trying to advise the writer. Then came the question of drink. Obviously, any waiter in the hotel, they ask you for a drink once you are done with the food. Okay. I never drink anything for luncheon. So initially she said she doesn't eat anything for lunch, but then she ordered one thing. While that was being cooked, she ordered another thing. Now, for the question of the drink, she says, I never drink anything for luncheon. Okay. Neither do I answered immediately, except white wine. She continued as though I had not spoken. These French white wines are so light, they are wonderful for digestion. What would you like? I asked. Hospitable, but not exactly emotional. She gave me a bright and a friendly flash of her white teeth. So, when the lady said, I never drink anything for luncheon, why did the writer immediately responded, neither do I? He did that because he did not have enough money and he did not want to spend more, because he just had 80 francs and he wanted to spend for the rest of the month. He wanted to save money. So he thought, if I assure her that he also doesn't have any drinks during the lunch or after the lunch, then that would save enough money. So he answers immediately. But before he could complete, what does the lady say? Except white wine. She continued as though I had not spoken. And then she says, these French white wines are so light. They are wonderful for digestion. So the lady is trying to tell the writer that she wants a French white wine after having 2 fishes. So out of generosity, out of kindness, the writer says, what would you like? I asked. Hospitable. So this is again another word for showing generosity or kindness. Now the writer was not really emotional. When he first met, he was, but now he was not, because he is getting an impression that the lady is spending so much. So now he was no more emotional. She gave me a bright and a friendly flash of her white teeth. My doctor will not let me drink anything but champagne. I imagine I turned a little pale. I ordered half a bottle. I mentioned casually that my doctor had absolutely forbidden me to drink champagne. So you see, the writer is trying to save more and more money by denying good things. Is it the case that he doesn't want to drink champagne? No, it's not. Now, anyone would want to drink a champagne in a nice hotel, but he doesn't have money. Now, when the writer asked the lady what would she like to have, then she says, I want a champagne. And she says, my doctor will not let me drink anything. So, which means she wanted to have the French white wine, but her doctor said she should drink only champagne. The writer turned a little pale. What is the meaning of pale? Light in color or shade, which means he is shocked. He is tensed because this lady is constantly ordering expensive things. So he ordered half a bottle and he denied that he could not have anything else. What are you going to drink then? Water. Water was free, so he said he will drink water. This is asked by the lady. So what happened after all? She ate the caviar and then the salmon. She talked happily of art and literature and music, but I wondered what the bill would come to. When my mutton chop arrived, she took me quite seriously to task. So, as I said, she had 2 fishes and she was constantly talking of things that she loved, that is art, literature, and music, but the writer is constantly worrying about the bill, right? He is wondering as to what the amount will be after having ordered so much. And finally, his mutton chop arrived. I see you are in the habit of eating heavy lunch. I'm sure it is a mistake. Why don't you follow my example and just eat one thing? I'm sure you would feel so much better for it. This is a huge irony. Why? Because the lady herself has eaten 2 fishes and she has already ordered a drink. But what does she say to the writer? She says, I do not eat much. I eat only one thing. And after having eaten 2 fishes, she is trying to advise someone who's just eating one thing, that is mutton chop. And then she's telling the writer that you would feel better if you just be like me and just eat one thing. So there's a big irony here. I'm only going to eat one thing, I said as the waiter came again with the menu. So the writer is actually eating only one thing because he has ordered only one thing called the mutton chop. But the waiter, as it happens in all the hotels, when you are done with your food, the waiter would come to you and say, what about the ice cream? Would you like to have some coffee? Would you like to have some brownie? Right? So here there is a waiter standing again with the menu after having ordered so much. She waved him aside with an airy gesture, which means she said, I don't want anything, thank you. She did that with her hand. No, I never eat anything for lunch. Just to buy, I never want more than that. And I eat that more as an excuse for conversation than anything else. I couldn't possibly eat anything more unless they had some of those great asparagus. I should be sorry to leave Paris without having some of them. So, why this is an irony? Because the lady had 2 fishes and maybe a champagne, and then she again speaks the same thing. She says, I usually do not have anything, and if I have something more for lunch, that's only to keep the conversation, to keep the talks going on and on. And then she says, how can someone leave Paris without eating those great asparagus? Now, what is this asparagus? It is a tall plant of the lady family with a fine feathery foliage cultivated for its edible shoots. Yeah, so Paris is well known for asparagus. And she's telling the writer, how can we leave without having asparagus? Let's have that. And she's telling that after having eaten so much. She says, I should be sorry to leave Paris without having some of them. This is making the writer more and more tensed. This is making the writer's heart sink and writer's mind spin. I had seen them in shops and I knew they were horribly expensive, right? They were too expensive. Madam wants to know if you had any of those great asparagus. I asked the waiter. The waiter is standing there with the menu, all right? And the number of times he came, the number of times the lady ordered, right? So now the lady wants an asparagus. And again, the writer's generosity is coming out even though he knows that he could not pay the bills. So he's asking the waiter if he had some great asparagus. I tried with all my might to will him to say no. So he asked in a very dull manner, in order for the waiter to say no. A happy smile spread over his face and he assured me that they had some so large, so tender, so very rich that it was a miracle. So the writer expected the waiter to say no, but unfortunately, the hotel did have some great asparagus of the best quality. I'm not least hungry, my guest sighed, but if you insist, I don't mind having some asparagus. So the writer ordered some of the asparagus. Aren't you going to have any? She asked writer. No, I never eat asparagus. I know there are people who don't like them. The fact is, you ruin your palate by all the meat you eat. So he's trying to make excuses because he doesn't want to pay more. So he does not order for himself and makes an excuse by saying that once you have eaten all the meat, then you ruin your palate. Now the palate is an area in the mouth, that is the upper part of your mouth. Let's check out the meaning. The roof of the mouth, separating the cavities of the mouth and nose in the vertebrae. So he makes a lame excuse and he says that if you eat asparagus after having eaten the meat, then probably you ruin your palate. So they waited for their asparagus to be cooked. In the meantime, the writer was panicking so much because he didn't have enough money to pay the bill. And now the question was not how much money he would have left for the rest of the month, but the question was, does he have enough money to pay the bill? And it will be absolutely embarrassing to ask the guest to pay the money. So he is thinking, it would be mortifying to find myself 10 francs short and be obliged to borrow from my guest. Two new words here. Mortifying is cause to feel very embarrassed or ashamed, and obliged is make legally or morally bound to do something. So while the asparagus is being cooked, what he is wondering is, it will look very embarrassing if I am 10 francs short, which means if the bill is 90 francs, then I will have to ask my guest if she has some more money. I could not bring myself to do that. He said, I can never do that. I knew exactly how much I had, and if the bill came to more, I made a decision that I would put my hand in my pocket with dramatic cry start up and say that it had been stolen. So now he's trying to make something up in his mind. He says, there will be a bill, it will be huge, and if the bill is above 80 francs and way more than that, what I'll do is I'll put my hand in my pocket and say, oh my god, I've lost my wallet. I lost all the money. I don't know who stole my wallet. I'll make some drama and I will start crying. I would start shouting, and that would help save me. Of course, it would be unfortunate if she had not money enough either to pay the bill. So he thinks that if I make some sort of drama and if I act as if my wallet was stolen, and at the same time if she also doesn't have enough money to pay the bill, then it would be bad, then it would be unfortunate for both of us. Then what's the option left? Would the people of the hotel allow them to leave? No, they would not. So the only thing would be to leave my watch, leave his watch, leave the writer's watch over there on the table, and tell the people at the hotel or the restaurant that he would come back and pay later. You keep the watch, I'll come back and pay later. The asparagus appeared. Now the asparagus was ready. It was ready to be eaten. They were big, delicious, and appetizing. I watched the shameless woman toast asparagus down her throat, and the smell of melted butter hit my nose. So all these expensive things, the writer never had imagined that he would order or eat someday in a very expensive restaurant. But now that the lady has already ordered, it was here on the table, and there is one word that you should learn. It is very often used. It is called appetizing. It means stimulating one's appetite, which means increasing hunger. So the smell of the asparagus was so tempting that it increased the hunger of the writer, because there was butter on it and it was melted because it was hot. So it hit the writer's nose, which means the smell reached him, and the writer also wanted to eat that asparagus. At last she finished, and out of kindness the writer said, coffee? She said, yes, just an ice cream and a coffee. So the biggest comedy is she is constantly stating that she doesn't eat much, but she's constantly ordering as well at the same time. I was past caring now, so I ordered a coffee for myself and ice cream and coffee for her. So initially the writer was also emotional, was caring when he first met that lady, but now looking at the fact that the lady was constantly ordering, constantly eating, the writer was not caring for her anymore now. There is one thing that I truly believe in, she said, as she ate the ice cream. Now, while eating as well, she's telling the same thing. One should always get up from a meal feeling one could eat a little more, which means she's trying to advise the writer that you should eat small, you should eat one thing only, and finally, when should you get up from the table? You should get up feeling hungry. You should still be feeling hungry and get up and leave the table to be healthy. That's what she's advising the writer. The writer says, "Are you still hungry?" I asked weakly. Why is he asking weakly? Because already the lady had ordered so much. "Oh no, I'm not hungry. You see, I don't eat lunch. I have a cup of coffee in the morning and then a dinner, but I never eat more than one thing for lunch." I was speaking for you. So, when she said one could eat a little more, then the writer thought that she was still hungry, and therefore, out of hospitality, out of kindness, he asked the lady if she was still hungry, and the lady says, no, I really don't have anything at luncheon. I just have a cup of coffee. Actually, I was speaking for you because you had a mutton chop, and I thought your stomach would be full. Oh, I see. Then terrible thing happened. While we were waiting for the coffee, the head waiter, with a pleasant smile on his face, came to us bearing a large basket full of big peaches. Alright. That's the terrible thing for the writer, because already he is tensed and in a panic mode, and he's wondering what the bill would be. And this is foils, right? So they have a lot of variety. And peaches. What is peaches? Let's check out the meaning. I haven't written it. I might have forgotten to mention the meaning. A peach is a round stone fruit with juicy yellow flesh and downy pinkish yellow skin. Let me copy that in my Word file. Alright, so this is another thing that's there in the hotel, and it looked beautiful. Okay, the rich tone of Italian country. But surely peaches were not in the season then. As I said, everything has a season, and peaches were not one of them. God knew what they cost, which means peaches were also very costly because they were off season, but still they were available in the hotel. So you can imagine mangoes in India, right? They are available only in certain season, but what if you go to purchase mango in any off season? Thus the prices of the mango would be sky high. So similarly, same was the case with peaches. You see, you have filled your stomach with a lot of meat, my one miserable little chop, and you can't eat any more. But I have just a snack, and I shall enjoy a peach. Look at the hilarious part here. The lady had a salmon, a caviar, a champagne, and then what else? Coffee and an ice cream, and before that as well she had something, asparagus. Yeah, after having all of these things, she is advising the writer that you had so much mutton, your belly is full, your stomach is heavy. But looking at the peaches, I feel that I just had a snack, I had a small meal, so I will have a little more, and I should have peach, I should think. That's what the lady thinks. The lady is thinking to have peach after having eaten so much. Now the bill came, and when I paid it, I found that I had only enough for quite inadequate tip. What is the meaning of inadequate? Lacking the quality or quantity required, insufficient for a purpose. So the bill came. The writer fortunately had enough money, so the bill was under 80 francs, the money that he had to spend for the rest of the month, right? And usually they gave tips to the waiters at the restaurant, right? And he just had 3 francs left. So what was the bill? 80 minus 3, that is 77. 77 francs was the bill, and just to set a good impression on the women, he left 3 francs for the waiter. But when I walked out of the restaurant, I had the whole month before me and not a penny in my pocket. Yeah, so the whole money was spent on the lunch and was spent on the ladies' lunch actually, because the writer himself did not order anything. Follow my example, she said as we shook hands. Now they were departing, they were leaving each other, and they were shaking hands therefore. And the lady says, you should follow my examples and never eat more than one thing for luncheon. After having eaten so much, she is advising the writer. Right? I will do better than that, I answered. I will eat nothing for dinner tonight. Now this is a sarcasm, and this is spoken by the writer because he knows that he doesn't have enough money for the dinner, but without the lady being informed about it. So the writer says, I'll follow your advice and I will have only one thing for lunch and for dinner, and I will eat nothing for dinner tonight. Humorist. So the lady, because she isn't aware that the writer is out of money, she calls him a humorist, someone who makes jokes, and she jumps into her cab and she says, you're quite a humorist, you make people laugh. But I've had my revenge at last. So here is the main part. Here is the most hilarious part and most interesting part of the chapter, the climax of the chapter, I should say. The writer had his revenge. The writer himself did not do anything, but still he says that he had a revenge. We should focus on this statement and then understand the meaning. Okay, I do not believe that I am vindictive man, but when the immortal gods take a hand in the matter, it is pardonable to observe the result with complacency. Let's see the meaning of vindictive. Vindictive is showing strong, unreasoning desire for revenge. So he says that I am not a person who takes revenge, right? I'm not a person who takes revenge. Now, revenge for what? Revenge for spending so much money. The lady spent his money, right? So he should take revenge, but he believes that he is not someone who takes revenge. But when the immortal gods, what is immortal? You call something as immortal if it can live forever, it never dies. Okay, so when the god take the matter in his hands, it is pardonable, which means it is forgivable, right? Able to be forgiven, excusable. It is forgivable to observe that the result with complacency. The complacency, this word is important in this chapter. Complacency is feeling of smug or uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievement, right? So to observe the result with satisfaction, right? So let's understand the meaning of this sentence. The writer believes that he is not someone who takes revenge, but when God takes the matter in his own hand, which means when God decides to take revenge, when God has already noted that the lady spent so much of money that the person had, when the person was not earning much, when the person had to spend the whole month with 80 francs. So he says when God knew about this and God took the matter in his own hands, then it was absolutely forgivable to observe the result with satisfaction. Now, why does he say that it was forgivable? Why does he think that it was forgivable for him to just forget the lady and forgive the whole situation about the luncheon? And why did he have so much satisfaction? Why was he able to observe the result with so much satisfaction? Because when the lady met the writer for the second time, when she came out of the interval in a movie theater, she was very heavy. She was 133 kilograms, right? So the writer observed the lady and her weight and how bad and ugly she looks because of the weight. He thought that alright, it's okay, God has already taken the revenge by making her fat, so I will forgive and forget the whole matter. So friends, this is the hilarious chapter called The Luncheon. If in case you find any doubts or concerns, do let me know in the comment section and I will be happy to assist you. Let me know what you need to learn. Let me know the topics or lessons which you have doubts in, and I will be happy to help you. I thank you and I hope you have a great day.